Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, I would like you to all give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Bill.
Thank you, Lenore. My name is Bill Hamilton, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. And I'd like to thank Duncan for asking me to talk tonight. It's a privilege to speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and although I don't do it very much, I always get nervous when I'm going to talk, and I know when I was new in the program, it was I don't know if it was fear or what it was, but I would shake, and I'd shake the podium. After about the second time that I spoke in a maximum security prison in Enfield, Connecticut, and I was shaking the podium because I was afraid they were going to arrest me and keep me. And when I sat down, my sponsor said, I was shaking so bad, and he said, "That's all right." He said, "That's just God trying to shake the truth out of you." And I remember that. Today I'm more nervous that I might get up here and decide to tell you how you ought to stay sober, and I have absolutely no idea what you ought to do. And so if you hear me say things that that you might ought to do, you might ought to check those in the big book, because I'm convinced that the only way I can stay sober is if I work the steps as they're written in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was always told to read the black part, and I got rather offended. And the white part always seemed so much more interesting. And my first sponsor said to me one time, he said, "What does it say on the front page of the book Alcoholics Anonymous?" And I started opening to, and he said, "No, stupid, the one right behind the cover." And I said, "It's blank." And he said, "Yeah, that's what you know about Alcoholics Anonymous." And that's about how much I know about Alcoholics Anonymous today. I really, what I know, what I've learned since I got here, I've learned a lot about me, and I've learned a lot of things that have helped me get closer to God. And by getting closer to God, I've ended up changing, and I've ended up staying sober. I've listened to a lot of tapes, and one in particular that I listened to talks, Bob Bazan's talks about changing. And I thought when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous that I was going to change. And my sponsor told me, if you could change, you wouldn't need Alcoholics Anonymous. If you could stay sober, you wouldn't need Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't understand that for a long time. But I heard Bob Bazan's talk, and he said that it's kind of like a farmer. You think of farmers growing things, and farmers don't grow crops. What they do is they till the soil and they fertilize it, and they plant the seed, and they create an environment where growth can take place and God grows. And a physician doesn't heal. A physician takes and cleans the wounds and sews their patient up and creates an antiseptic environment where healing can take place and God heals. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't change. What we do is we work the steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, practice the principles to the best of our ability, and create an environment where growth can take place or change can take place, and God changes us. And that's really what's happened for me. When I came here, I was 28 years old and my life was over. And when I walked into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had hair down the middle of my back and a beard down, halfway down my belly, and no teeth and wine sores all over my body. I hadn't bathed in about 3 months, and they didn't ask for newcomers, they seemed to know. And they sat me in the front row, and 2 or 3 people got up and moved. I think they couldn't stand the smell. And I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous for any good reason. I didn't come because I wanted to get sober or because I wanted to change my life or anything else. I came because I got in a car without finding out first where it was going. And if I had asked more questions to find out where the car was going that night, you'd have a different speaker today. Because I wouldn't have got sober. I had no intention of going to Alcoholics Anonymous on purpose. For at least 10 years, people had suggested that I might want to go with them to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting for some reason. And I told them I wasn't an alcoholic. And you just don't understand. And alcoholics, they're different than me. I just drink a lot. And besides, I need this. It's kind of like I drank to get the promises that are listed in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I drank, alcohol was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. It was allowing me to fit in and allowing me to deal with my problems. So I could not see giving alcohol up. I had no intention of it. And besides, I wasn't an alcoholic because I had grown up in a family of alcoholics, and my father was an alcoholic, and I didn't want to be like him, so I just pretended I wasn't. Turned out I was a lot like him, but I didn't find that out until after I'd been sober for a long time. And I lived life judging myself by my intentions, and the world judged me by my actions. I didn't like going to jail all those times, and my ex-wives, they kind of thought I did, because I did it so often. And but they were always judging me by my actions, and I just, I always judged myself by my intentions, and I didn't come out so bad. And I don't ever remember not drinking. It just got progressively more as I got older. By the time I was 12 years old, I was drinking, on a regular basis. There were periods of time when I drank daily, but for the most part, I just drank on a regular basis. I would quit for a while, every once in a while, just to show everybody that I could. Those periods of time got shorter and shorter and shorter. And until the last probably 5 or 6 months before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, when I drank around the clock and couldn't put it down and couldn't give it up. And until I found myself accidentally in Massachusetts and accidentally in that car going to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And when I went in there, I heard a couple of speakers. I don't remember too much about what the first speaker said, but I identified with almost everything that the second speaker said in his drunkalogue. I had done a lot of the things he had done, and I had had a lot of the feelings that he had had, and I understood that maybe I was in the right place. Till he got to the end of his drunkalogue and talked about living in a refrigerator box, and I thought, Jesus, I scared myself. I've never lived in a refrigerator box. Maybe I'm not really an alcoholic after all. at any rate, I became an alcoholic that night. I mean, that's, you know, it sounds kind of strange, but Dr. Paul used to talk about it, and that's where I understood what really happened to me that night. When I got to that first meeting, I was not an alcoholic. And seems that the more I listened, the more I identified, and I thought, well, maybe I am an alcoholic. And what he said is, as soon as that thought occurs, it's too late. You might as well stay in Alcoholics Anonymous, because because that's when I became an alcoholic. The next, you know, at the end of that meeting, a man walked up to me and introduced himself. He said, "My name's Les Clark, and I'm your sponsor." Seems his sponsor had assigned him to me. And the first thing I said to Les was, "I don't need a sponsor." And the second thing I said was, "What's a sponsor?" You know, anyway, I thought everybody got their sponsors that way. I thought I was stuck with this guy. I would have fired him if I'd known I could. But if I'd have fired him, you'd have a different speaker tonight, because there's no way in hell I could have stayed sober on my own or learned anything about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous on my own. Les used to say all kinds of insulting things to me, like, "Why don't you try not telling one lie for one day?" And you know, he's the one who told me about reading the black part of the book and about what was on the front page. And he used to come pick me up. He came and picked me up one night and took me off to a meeting in New Hampshire. And I said, "Why don't you ever call before you come?" And he said, "Because you wouldn't be here." And he took me up to that meeting in New Hampshire and was in a insane asylum. And we sat down. We were half an hour before the meeting started. We were the only ones in there other than the people making the coffee. And we sat down. He nudged me with his shoulder, and he said, "I take my coffee with cream and sugar." I took the hint, went up, got him some coffee, got myself some coffee, sat back down. He poked me again, spilled my coffee. Said, "By the way, you're the guest speaker." You know, and in that area, when I got sober, that, you know, they suggested that you not speak for at least 90 days, and I had about 85 days or something. I thought I had him. I said, "I don't have 90 days." He said, "Doesn't matter. Most of these people don't have 90 minutes. And anyway, I don't remember what I said. I have no idea. Second time I spoke was that time in Enfield, Connecticut, and the last couple of days of my drinking were kind of a whirlwind. I was working for a construction company that I used to own a large part of, and had sold it to this guy that was sober 23 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he had suggested that I may not be an alcoholic, but I couldn't either drink, or I couldn't both drink and work for him at the same time. So I told him I wouldn't drink anymore if it bothered him. And what I really meant was I would quit letting him catch me. And the things were getting bad, so I was looking around to find a way out of town. I wanted to move to Estes Park, Colorado, where things would be better in my life. So I put this farm up for sale that I lived on, and I offered it real cheap because I didn't own it. And I didn't have any illusions that I could actually sell it, but I was hoping that somebody would give me a $500 or $1,000 good faith deposit so I could leave town. And I figured the people who really owned it, they lived in Cleveland. They'd never know. Trouble is, they got that local paper and they knew. They called the sheriff. The sheriff was wanting to talk with me. I went to work that day. I didn't always go to work, but I went to work that day, and I had a bottle underneath the seat of the bulldozer I was driving. And I used to look around to see if that guy was sneaking up on me that told me I couldn't drink. And this time I got too quick. I looked to the right, put the bottle to my mouth, and looked as I was looking to the left, and there he was in his blazer. And so I shut this D8 that I was driving down. It didn't have a pony motor to start it, so I thought I got him now. You know, I've shut this thing down way out here in the boonies, and he'll have to get his other dozer out here to push it and start it. Got down off the dozer, went down and took another drink in front of him, said, "You can stick this job." Turned around and walked away, and then I realized I was 9 miles from my car. I went home and started packing, and some people called and wanted to see the farm. And I said, "Come on over." By the time they got there, I got drunk, and I thought they were from the ATF, so I fired on them out the window. And that was in 1976, and I didn't realize until Waco happened what would have happened if they really were from the ATF. And anyway, I didn't get my $500 or $1,000 good faith deposit. They went and talked to the city police, and while they were there, I finished packing my car and I left town. And I headed for Estes Park, and I got I got drunk and went in a blackout, and I woke up the next morning and I was in Pennsylvania, which is east of Ohio, and I would have to go either through or around Ohio to get to Estes Park, and I didn't have enough money to go around, and I didn't dare go through Ohio and get arrested, so I went to Massachusetts. And that was the night that I got sober. And so when I went to that prison in Enfield, Connecticut to speak with my sponsor, I thought they'd find out, you know, from the fingerprints, and they'd keep me. And so that's why I was, you know, really afraid of what was going on. And I don't remember what I said. I was supposed to talk for 10 minutes. I think I talked for 2 or 3. And then I sat down, and about 3 months later, a guy came up to me at a meeting in Northampton, Massachusetts, and said, "I'd like to thank you for talking in the prison in Enfield." And I'd only talked there the one time, and I said, "Why would you thank?" You know, he had been an inmate there, and he said that after hearing me talk, he realized that he could stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous after he got out of prison. He'd only been going to meetings to get good points to get out early. And he realized that he could stay sober after hearing me talk, and I couldn't remember anything I said. I said, what is it that I said? You know, I thought every time I talk, I'm going to say it. And he said, "Well, you know, it really wasn't so much what you said." And I said, well, what was it? He says, "Well, I just figured if anybody as sick as you could stay sober, anybody could." And, you know, I guess he's right. It was about 2 weeks after that they gave me this medallion for 6 months of sobriety, and they didn't have all those plastic chips up there, and they just at 6 months they'd give this metal medallion, and then after a year they'd give you a chip for each year. And anyway, I took this home for 6 months and showed it to my grandmother, she said, "What's that?" I said, "What'd you get that?" And I said, "I got that for 6 months of sobriety." And she said, "What the hell did they give you for 84 years? I kind of took the wind out of my sails. And that's when I realized that I was just doing what some people do just naturally, you know. That's when I realized that staying sober, you know, that's what I was really supposed to be doing, and living this life is what I was supposed to be doing all my life, and it wasn't any big deal. You know, it wasn't special, and I was just doing the things that God put me on this earth to do. After a few more months in Massachusetts, I wasn't doing too well. I'd gotten fired from the only job I could get, vacuum cleaning floors, and that's because I felt too important to vacuum floors, so I was doing a bad job. And so I moved to Arizona, and that was because of seeing a ball game on Arizona on Christmas Day on the television, and by that time I was living in a snowbank in my car, which wouldn't run. But I was over to a friend's house with it was another guy that my sponsor sponsored, and my sponsor, and the three of us were watching a ball game on the television, and they said it was 95 degrees in Arizona that day, and I told my sponsor for 2 cents I'd move there so I wouldn't freeze to death while I was starving to death. Yeah. He gave me the 2 cents and said, "When are you going?" And he'd been trying to get me to do something different with my life for a long time, and you know, not really pushing it, but every time I suggested that maybe I'd do something to become self-supporting through my own contributions, he supported that. And he kept asking me every day when I was going to move to Arizona. And about 2-3 weeks later, I sold all my tools that I had left and bought a bus ticket to Arizona. And I went to Phoenix. At least I told him I was going to Phoenix. I knew when I got on the bus that I was really going to Scottsdale, you know, because I thought Scottsdale was a much nicer place than Phoenix. And so I got off at the Phoenix bus station and took a city bus out to Scottsdale. I had this address of this Alano Club in Scottsdale, and that's where I was headed. And I got there. Actually, the way I got there was I asked the bus driver if he knew where this Alano Club was, and he said, "I know every bar in Scottsdale, and never heard of that one." But the guy in the seat behind me said, "Hey," he said, "you're looking for the Alano Club?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, I went there one time, you got my court card signed." He said, "I know where it is, I'll take you." So anyway, he dropped me off there. I've never seen him again. And I walked up the stairs to this Alano Club, and that night, I met Mary Lou that night, and I met a bunch of other people, and sometime after that, I found out that Mary Lou and her friend were commiserating with each other that why they bothered to pay taxes if the police couldn't keep people like me out of Scottsdale. You know, I thought I was doing pretty well. I'd kind of cleaned up a little bit. You know, I took a shower every once in a while and kind of trimmed my beard a little bit. I still didn't have teeth, and still had hair down the middle of my back, and you know but I thought I was doing pretty well, and I was embarrassed because I didn't have a job, and so people asked me what I did. I said I was retired. I found out later they thought, well, you know, he looks 65, you know, and and I met a bunch of people that saved my life, you know, and I went to that meeting on a Friday night, that first meeting that I was in Scottsdale. There were 12 other people in that meeting, and I remember each one of them, what they looked like, and I remember their names, and over half of them have become my lifelong friends. And Mary Lou was there, and we've been married now for 19 years. And that's where my life started to turn around, was in Scottsdale. And it started to turn around because I was willing to work the steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous instead of just fooling around. And I was willing to ask God for help because I couldn't handle it myself. And that took a while, but when I finally was able to do that, things in my life started to change. I remember the day that that happened is I was sitting in the Alano Club with 17 cents, my total life savings, and 2 sea bags full of dirty clothes. And I turned my will and my life over to the care of God. And within 20 minutes I had a job, and within 2 hours I had a place to live. And I had all of these things just came to me as a result of putting myself wholly in God's hands and making the decision that I wouldn't try to decide what was best for me. I would let God do that. A little while later, one of the things that I had on my list of things that God was going to have to help me with was teeth. Guy walked up to me after a meeting at noon at that Alano Club and said, why don't you have any teeth? And I told him about the 4 cops. And I told him about the broken teeth and the fact that I didn't have enough money to get caps, so I got them all pulled. And turned around and I walked away. And the next day he came up to me and he said, no, really, he said, why don't you have teeth? Thought the guy was simple-minded. I told him about the 4 cops. Turned around and walked away. The next day he came up to me and he said, really, he said, I want to know why you don't have teeth. And he pushed me in the corner and stuck his business card in my face and said, I'm a dentist and I'd like to help you get some teeth. That was the first time I can remember in a long, long time that anybody had offered to do anything for me without wanting anything in return. Because I knew and he knew that there wasn't a damn thing I could give him. Hell, I couldn't even pay him for the teeth. Anyway, on my first birthday in Alcoholics Anonymous, he put those false teeth in my mouth. My sponsor at that time took me out and got me a haircut. Went over to Mary Lou's house and I shaved. And I went to that noon meeting at the Alano Club in Scottsdale, and nobody recognized me. The first person who finally figured out who I was, because Mary Lou wouldn't tell him, said, oh my God, you're not a day over 40. And I was 29. Anyway, I got a job through people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a job, and I was out hitchhiking home from washing dishes at this steakhouse, and I looked up and I said, this hitchhiking isn't working. It's 3 or 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, and there's no cars coming by, and we need some transportation, you know. And about 10 minutes later, a car came by and screeched to a halt, and it was a woman that I had met that day at that Alano Club at the noon meeting. I've never seen or heard from her again. And she asked me what I was doing out there hitchhiking, and I told her, and she said, you know, the reason that my husband and I moved here from New York to Scottsdale is he had a heart problem, and right before he had that problem, he bought a new bicycle, and he can't ride it, and you may have it. And I often wondered what would have happened that night if I'd have prayed for a car. I'm never satisfied. I just, any rate, I got a better job. I was washing dishes in that steakhouse, and the cook took me out on the floor and introduced me to a guy. And he said, "This is Don. He's a electrical contractor. Tell him you're an electrician and you'd like a job." And I said, "I'm an electrician and I'd like a job." He wrote on a piece of paper and said, "Show up here on Monday." So I rode my bicycle out there and went to work for this guy on Monday. And on Wednesday, he came over and he said, "You lied to me." And I thought, "Oh shit, what'd I tell him?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, when we talked that night," he said, "you led me to believe you weren't very good. And so I found out you do know what you're doing." And so he gave me a $2 raise before I ever got my first check. And when he gave me that check, he said, "You need to get a car." He said, "This riding your bicycle back and forth, you're all wore out when you get here and you're late, so you need to get a car." And he said, "Why don't you go over to this car dealer and get a car?" And I said, "That's a Ford dealer and I don't like Fords." And that's another story, but actually what the story behind the Ford is, when I was 15 years old, I was out. I had this license that was only good during daylight hours, and I was supposed to be home before dark, and I was in town drinking with some friends in the woods. It got to be 1 o'clock in the morning, and even though it was summer, it wasn't light out. And I thought, "Oh my God, I'm late. I better really hurry." And so I was speeding in that old Ford, and I was drunk, and I went around a corner too fast, and I rolled that thing over about 3 times. And when I crawled out of it, I was so drunk nothing happened to me. And but I thinking about that, and I'm just shaking my head, and I swore right then and there, I will never, ever, ever buy another Ford. I just simply blamed everything and everybody for my problems except me. And I, that lasted long into sobriety. But at any rate, so I wouldn't buy that Ford. So he said, "You smart ass." He said, "There's a Chevy dealer across the street." I went over there and took that check over there, and I put a down payment on an El Camino. My credit was lousy if they'd ever checked it. They obviously didn't, because they let me drive it away. And I picked it up that night, and that was one of the things on my list, was a car and a job. And I had my job, and I had my teeth, and I had all this stuff. And one of the things on my list was a girlfriend, and I got a girlfriend, and that was Mary Lou's sponsor. And so anyway, so I had all this stuff, just coming to me in my life, and life was great. And things were going so well, I told God, I said, "This is great." I said, "In fact, you've straightened things out so well, I can handle it now." And how well I handled it was that in the next week, after I decided I could handle things, I got fired from my job. The place that I was staying, the guy asked me to move. The clutch pedal in that El Camino broke in half. My upper plate split down the middle, and my girlfriend moved to Hawaii. And I can look back at that time, and I can see the difference between having God run my life and having me run my life. It's just as clear as the day, you know, that it happened, and I wouldn't have missed that experience for anything, because now I know that I'm much better off with everything that God wants me to have than I am with anything that I want. You know, and I understand today that some of God's greatest gifts are my unanswered prayers. And everything that I want is probably harmful for me, and everything that God wants is only good for me. And I've been given just a wonderful way of life. You know, today is everything continues to get better and better and better. You know, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I just, you know, was crawling around, you know, knee walking drunk and totally unemployable. And today, because of the things that have happened to me when I asked God for help, you know, I worked for contractors for a few years, and then I went to work for an architect, and I studied with that architect, and I've been licensed now for several years, and they trust me to run multi-million-dollar projects for them. And you know, I was telling Mary Lou and I were friends for 5 years, and then we fell in love and been married, and we've been married now for 19 years. You know, I've got a family that's never seen me drunk, you know, with, you know, 2 stepsons and a stepdaughter, and a son-in-law and 2 daughters-in-law and 5 grandchildren, and not one of them have ever seen me drunk. It's just absolutely amazing. You know, a lot of people get their old lives back, and I didn't get my old life back. I got a much better one, a new one. And so, you know, if you're not getting your old life back, just ask God for help. You know, it's you know, whatever He has in mind for me is what I want today, not what I want. You know, that relationship with God has grown and grown to the point where I ask Him for help now much quicker than I used to. I still wait. You know, I think maybe I can handle it. Maybe I can get things straightened out. You know, oftentimes they ask for the wrong things. In November of '99, the job that I was working for, I'd worked there for 17 years, and the company had been sold, and things were changing, and I didn't like the way things were going, and so I asked God for help straightening that company back out, you know. And 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail from another company asking me to go to work for them. I said, that's not what I want. I want you to straighten this one out. And I went to interview for them, you know, and went to interview with them just for grins. I mean, you know, not because I thought I'd get the job. I went to interview with them, and Mary Lou said, how'd it go? And I said, not too well. I said, I'll never hear from them again. They said they'd call, but I don't think I'll ever hear from them again. A few days later, they called and asked me to come back for a second interview. Went back for the second interview, and that interview went very well until I told them how much I wanted to make. And Mary Lou said, how'd it go? And I said, went fine till I told them how much I wanted to make. And then they ushered me right out the door. I'll never hear from them again. They called and offered me more than I asked for. And that's why we moved down here from San Francisco to go to work for this new company. But that's how, and this, I mean, this is just, you know, after 1 year with them, you know, things are just going great. You know, they gave me a raise, a bonus, and gave me a raise, or gave me a promotion. And it just, that's the way things go when I put my life in God's hands. Whatever's going on in my life, if I'll just give it to God, everything will be fine. You know, one time I was really upset because I had some surgery on my nose, and the first one I had didn't bother me too much, but the second time when the growth came back and they said they were going to have to operate on it again, I got pretty scared. And I remember I asked God for help, and I didn't know what I wanted, but I just asked Him for help. A few minutes later, this guy that I sponsored called me up and had all these problems, and I had to go talk to him, and I forgot all about my problems. And that's the way God works in my life. You know, everything has a solution if I'll simply ask for that help. You know, and the life today that I have is better than anything that I ever dreamed of in my wildest drunken dreams. And the thing that I wish for you is that you'll come in here and work the steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to the best of your ability, because I know what's waiting for you is the life that I've had for the last 25 years. Thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.